Hey everybody, it's your boy, and today's video is going to be a message to the American right, because they really need this message now that Kyle Rittenhouse's verdict has been in for the past couple of days, and that he has walked free, and we have now seen justice has been served. He is innocent, as we could tell from the footage anyway. It should never have gone to court, but nonetheless, he is innocent, and the Second Amendment has been bolstered as a result, which is fantastic news. But this message is important because they really need to hear this. A lot of them, the ones who are complacent, the ones who think that once a victory has been achieved, that's it for that issue. That's it for liberty. When, I hate to say it guys, but the fight is never over. The Kyle Rittenhouse verdict is fantastic. I honestly was elated that he won, that he proved his innocence, because he had to prove his innocence. He wasn't disproving his guilt, he was proving his innocence, because for the past year the man had been demonised constantly by the media in the court of public opinion. He was declared guilty before he even walked into the courthouse. He didn't really have a fair trial, let's be honest. He didn't, and that's an issue you're going to have to address, although I don't know if it's necessarily relevant to this video, but you guys will need to find out, and this is also the case in this country, you'll need to find out how to stop the left using the court of public opinion to destroy people's lives. You're going to have to figure out a way to combat the media who are pushing this, and to make sure that people who get into problems such as Kyle Rittenhouse got into, or people who are accused of crimes or this, that and the other, you guys will need to figure out a way to stop that from happening or to mitigate it, because most likely that's never going to leave us, because people are stupid and we don't really learn from our mistakes. And just because Kyle Rittenhouse has walked free, he has been proven innocent, doesn't mean that he will be the only person that will be declared innocent when another case like this, which will inevitably happen, happens. A lot of you who are statists will think that, well, surely this has set a legal precedence where people who get into a similar situation as Kyle Rittenhouse can be declared innocent of any wrongdoing, because if it's clear-cut self-defense, then surely the judge and the juries will say, yeah, this is clearly self-defense, it'll be fine, there's precedence, this is okay. Well, not necessarily, because you only have to look at certain places in America to see that, well, in certain states, self-defense laws are not the same. Basically, all the blue states, depending on how deeply blue they are, have, let's just say, not as good self-defense laws and rights as, say, more deeply red states. And that will be where a lot of potential Kyle Rittenhouses will happen, and not all of them will be declared innocent. A lot of them will go to jail, whether or not we think morally or even legally that they justifiably defended themselves, because they will be made examples of, because they will go through the exact same issue that Kyle Rittenhouse went through, with the court of public opinion being used against him, people protesting, trying to intimidate the jury, activist judges, because again, he had a lot of luck on his side. A lot of people think that this is the system working as it is intended. Not necessarily, no. Because what you guys need to realise is that it's roulette when it comes to having a court case. You don't know if you're going to get a biased activist judge. Luckily, Rittenhouse didn't. He had a judge that was far too fair, because, as we all know, in many cases, he could have thrown the case out with prejudice, but he didn't. He could have done that after the prosecution violated Rittenhouse's rights several times and were breaking several rules. He was lucky that he had a judge exactly like that. He could have had a judge who instead was as left-wing and as biased as these prosecutors, who was hell-bent on making an example out of Kyle Rittenhouse so that nobody else dares defend themselves. But he didn't get that person. But other people will, other people have. And not only that, a biased jury. We're lucky that this jury was strong and brave enough to ignore the intimidation and the threats from the left and do what needed to be done. I don't think a lot of other juries will be that strong. And you guys have to prepare for anything like that. You have to be prepared for activist judges. You have to be prepared for weak juries, or just ideologically biased juries, and these horrible prosecutors who will do anything in their power to convict. You have to be aware of the state. The state does not like people defending themselves. They don't like the right to self-defense or the right to bear arms, because not only do they want people to use the state to defend themselves, because it's all part of gaining control, and to have a justifiable reason to have a state to continue doing what it wants, but also a Second Amendment, a right to bear arms, threatens them. Even if millions of people are just armed with long rifles and pistols, it's still hundreds of millions of people that outnumber all the state troopers and all the soldiers, etc., despite their massive amounts of technology. Now, whether or not the two sides may win is immaterial. It's still a massive threat to be heavily outnumbered by an armed and dangerous populace. So that's why they want to curb those rights, so that you are essentially powerless and defenceless to not only defend yourself in the streets against criminals that they may have a vested political interest in keeping around for whatever reason, or they just want you to use the police more, but also because you're a threat to their power if you have a gun. Remember that this will always be a battle as long as these state actors like the Biden government, the bureaucracy, the deep state are in power. If you don't act now, if you manage to win back the presidency in 2024 and actively start purging the deep state, purging these people from local levels also, because that's what you need. You need to make sure you have good DAs, good juries, good judges, etc., etc. If you don't do any of this, then your rights will be eroded. You have not won the war. You won one battle. And liberty always has to be fought for every single day. You can't just win one war for liberty and think, well, that's it, it's done and dusted. No. In a couple of months, in a couple of years, they'll be back for more. You have to be ready. This is not over. And likewise, I don't think you guys should necessarily attack Kyle Rittenhouse. I don't think it's everybody. It's just a few people on the more extreme fringes who are attacking Kyle for his comments about BLM. The kid's a normie. And he also could be saying that to defend himself. We don't really know. It doesn't really matter. It's immaterial. You should be defending him not because he could necessarily be a practical use for the culture war, but morally. Now, for those of you who may not remember, why do you think I defended Dick Coughlin back in the day from his false accusations of sexual harassment? It wasn't because it was pragmatic at the time. I wasn't even thinking about tactics back then. It was a long time ago and I was naive. But I did it because of the principle. I did it because here was a man who, despite him being a crazy leftist, was under attack. Now, yeah, I do understand the nature for some pragmatic beliefs. Maybe sometimes you need to do the opposite in order to get a different result. So, for example, some people have argued that maybe we should force the left, the establishment, into going too far with cancel culture, too far with the censorship, because then their foot soldiers will start complaining, and then their theoreticians and their strategists will then start complaining because it'll start happening to them, or they're getting too many people complaining that the tactics aren't working, and then we'll start seeing them pivot towards free speech, which can only be good for us because, well, we don't need to lie, and they can be exposed, and there's nothing they can do about it. So I do understand that there is a case for the more pragmatic tactics and for the more idealistic tactics, and really we should be using both. But nonetheless, that does not change the fact that the fight isn't over. In fact, the fight will never be over because people like this, these totalitarians, these anti-liberty people, will always exist. So just remember that, guys. Just because the Rittenhouse trial was a battle that was won, doesn't mean the war is won. This war may never ever truly see an end because of human nature. But just remember that. So until next time, it's been your boy, and I'll see you all later.